This is the meeting of the San Angelo Development Corporation Board on Wednesday, December 17th. It is now 8:32. We're starting just a few moments late, but I'd like to call this meeting to order. And with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Tommy Hebert to open us with prayer.
Please bow your heads with me. Dear God, it seems like it's really easy to be more joyful and cheerful and thankful this time of year for many of us, and yet there are many of those that can see no hope and have no hope for whatever reason. As we celebrate Advent and your first coming, but as we also anticipate the second Advent and your second coming, we do have reason for hope because of the Son that you sent 2,000 years ago. Help us to keep that in mind. Help us to, as the children do this time of year, have all the awe and wonder and excitement about the season. Help us to approach this time of year the very same, but help us to approach every day of the year the same. And I pray these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tommy. At this time, we'll take public comment. The board takes public comment on all items on the regular agenda. Public input on a regular agenda item will be taken at its appropriate discussion. Public input on an item not on the agenda or consent agenda may be identified and requested for consideration by the board at this time. The board may request any item to be placed on a future agenda or for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for public comment. At this time, is there any public comment? There is none, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. The first item on the consent agenda is consideration of approving the November 17th, 2014 minutes of the City of San Angelo Development Corporation, COSA DC.
You know, I noticed in the minutes, I think can't we take all the consent agenda as just one?
Yes, we can.
Okay, but I did notice if I'm trying to pull it up here, that it listed Pedro Ramirez as one of the directors and not Mr. Flores.
Yes, I've since changed that, so the minutes we have now
will
are
reflect
corrected.
that change.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
With that being changed and in order, I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, and just for the record, I'll read the other two items on that agenda. The second being consideration of approving necessary corporation disbursements, and the third being consideration of approving the November 14th financial statements and any action connected thereto.
Move approval for the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? Any public comment? With that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you. Scratch that thought. Welcome, Daniel. We were at risk of losing our quorum, so we were going to rearrange some agenda items, but now that we have 5 up here, it's not a problem. We'll continue in numerical sequence. On the regular agenda, a presentation and update on ballot park project status. Presentation by Parks and Recreation Director Carl White. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning. Yes, Carl White, Parks and Recreation Director. What I'd like to do is give some quick updates on some of these major projects. If you'd like to get more detail, see images, more financial details, we can come back and give a more detailed report. Just going down the list, the Concho River, as you know, the largest piece of that project has been completed. There were different smaller pieces of that project, like the dredging of the river, the completion of the Paseo from Celebration Bridge up to where it hadn't been finished years ago. But the last big project was all the bank stabilization work and the trail work and the improvements of the parks and lights along the way from about First Street to about Concho Avenue. There is about $1 million left. Council has given us direction to work on the Bosque area, and the Bosque area is that area between Irving Street and Chadbourne Street where the washer pitching court area is. There's 3 things that we're doing there. We're building a concession building, doing some side improvements, and building a putt-putt golf course, an 18-hole putt-putt golf course. The bids for the concession building are out now. The requests for proposals for the putt-putt golf course are out now. We already took to council a request to negotiate with a concessionaire, to hire a concessionaire to operate that area once everything is done. So that's the update on the river project. The Red Arroyo Trail, maybe somebody else will give an update on that, but that project has begun. There was some money from half-cent sales tax. Most of it was from a grant and then also some stormwater funds. That project has begun. What they're doing now is digging out the water detention areas, and then they'll do the crossings, the bridge crossings, and then the trail work. So I believe that project should wrap up early summer. City parks, there is some money left in city parks, but that money that we first got, which was $1.5 million, some of that money did go over to the Red Arroyo Trail project, but that money was allocated towards neighborhood park renovations. So we've been doing those projects in-house and basically tackle one every year or two. So we have money left over to do, and this is a plan we took to council, I guess it's been a couple of years, the order that we're doing these. The next one is Bradford Park, then it's Brentwood Park, then it's Brown Park, and then Santa Rita. There's still some other parks that are in poor shape that need to be renovated, such as Mountain View Park and Bell Park, and about the time that we run out of money, we're going to need money to renovate College Hills United Park. So we still need that money to renovate some parks. The sports and athletic facilities, the tennis complex is done. We still have some money left in the account for the tennis facility. That was intentional, so we'd have some money to overlay the courts when we needed to a few years down the road. The Texas Bank Sports Complex is done. 29th Street Complex, there is money that still hasn't, that was budgeted but hasn't been released in the bond yet for the 29th Street Complex. Back in 2008, 2009, we were having budget discussions about the fact that we were building and renovating new projects but didn't have enough money to maintain those projects, and we were looking at ways to cut the operation budget. At that time, the mayor and the city manager, Mayor New and Harold Dominguez, gave us direction to put that project on hold. It's been on hold since then. So we haven't gotten direction to reinitiate that project. Fort Concho got $1 million for redoing the visitor center at Fort Concho. $100,000 was released initially, and that was for assessment and design work. What has been done is that we put out a request for proposal for a firm to come in and take a look at what we could do to make that visitor center. So we got permission from council to negotiate an agreement with a firm, that's what is ongoing now. So we could bring that firm in so they could take a look at the situation and kind of envision, strategize what that visitor center could be and look like, utilizing the buildings that we have already. Let's see. And there's still $900,000 towards that project that hasn't been, I guess, bonded out, released to be used. We were going to do that once we find out what the plan should be. Let's see. The Coliseum is done. The Convention Center is done. There is some money left over, and that plus some money we got from council from hotel occupancy tax is to go towards redoing the marquee that needs to be done out in the front. Fairgrounds project's done. The auditorium, a lot of the work that was done early on with the auditorium was tied in with the city hall, the shared HVAC plant, some structural work that needed to be done underneath the floor of the auditorium. Thank you. I'm almost finished. But what we had left to work on the auditorium was $1.8 million from house and sales tax, and then we added about $300,000 from insurance fund to redo the roof. And what was the bigger holdup was waiting for the fundraising from the San Angelo Performing Arts Coalition. That's been done. They've been very successful in raising funds for their building and for the auditorium. So we have proceeded with the project. SAPAC has hired the architect, Killis Allman. The city put out a request for proposals for construction manager at risk. Council gave us direction to bring them on board. We had the first meeting with the architect and the construction manager at risk last week. So that's moving forward. Hopefully that project will begin early next year. I think that's it on all those projects, unless y'all have any questions.
Are there any questions?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl.
I'll take my water with me.
Okay, moving on to item number 5. Update and presentation on ballot city water supply projects. Presentation, Executive Director, actually, I think we have Russell standing in.
We've had a little turnover at the city. We have a new Assistant Director for Water Utilities, Russell Pell.
Welcome, Russell.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I've got a little presentation here. No, just give me a second and I'll get it set up. All right. Our Hickory project is nearing completion. We're very close. It's a very big facility. The picture that I have here is of the new groundwater treatment facility. It's at our current water treatment plant. From this picture, we're basically from the north looking south. It's a rather large facility, and it's kind of hard to get a good overall picture of it. This is just another picture kind of looking, a little closer up. This building is approximately 28,000 square feet, and it's in the clear height in the inside of the building is approximately 22 feet tall. So, there's a lot of big equipment in there, and it's, just we need a lot of space to be able to maneuver everything. This is another picture looking from the east, looking west. Just kind of hard to look at everything. This is from inside the building. This is, if you'll look on the right-hand side of the facility here is where the water actually comes into the facility from the well field. From there, it's piped into these series of pumps. These pumps, what they do is they add water into the water supply. It aerates the water. Basically, what that is kind of the starting point of the treatment. What it does is it aerates the water to help remove the iron. That's the first stage of this. The filtration system is to start removing the iron out of the system. From there, it goes into these oxidation vessels. In here, it not all the water goes through those pumps to get aerated, so it again mixes in the pipe and then into these oxidation vessels to where it gives it contact time to interact with the oxygen to help the iron settle out. And then from these oxidation vessels, here's another picture of them. They're really large. They're about 14 foot in diameter. And there again, these pictures don't always do it justice. But from there, it goes into these pressure vessels. These pressure vessels are where the iron is actually pulled out. These are the actual filters for the iron. Each of these pressure vessels have 4 different chambers within them. They're separate of one another in that they can, if one filter goes out or if we have a problem, it doesn't necessarily, we don't lose that entire pressure vessel due to maintenance and everything. From there, it goes into our WRT ion exchange vessels. Each of these vessels are capable of handling 2 million gallons per day of water flow going through them.
Russell?
Yes.
What does WRT stand for?
Oh, it's the company that is actually providing the filters and everything.
Okay.
It's just the company name.
Thank you.
I'm sure that it's an acronym for something, but I would be lying to you today. But so anyway, each of these they're set up in trains. There's 4 trains. Each train has 3 vessels. The water goes in through the first train and works its way down to the third, or works it into the first vessel down into the third. 1, 2, 3. Each of those vessels is capable of handling 2 million gallons per day, and we have a total of 4 trains in there, so we're able to treat 8 million gallons per day. here's just another closer look at them. These two are also very large vessels. They're approximately 14 foot in diameter as well, and I think they stand about 10 to 12 foot in height. They're once again very, very large vessels. We'll probably, this is where the ion or the radium is radium is actually removed from the water. It basically acts as a kind of a magnet, more or less. The water pulls through those filters and just removes the radium. And then once they go through here, we've got very clean water. We basically add a little bit of chlorine to this water, and from there it goes into our clear well, where it's then distributed out to the rest of the San Angelo. Part of this project also included a new disinfection facility. Basically what that means is we're putting all of our chlorine and liquid ammonium sulfate into one area. Currently they're kind of spread out through the existing water treatment facility or the water plant. This facility is also quite large. It's I've got it here. It's approximately 6,800 square foot building and approximately 29 foot in height. The main reason for that is for the loading and offloading of the chlorine tanks. That are the people that we buy from the chlorine from will be able to drive through this facility, and we've got an overhead crane and scales. These are the chlorine scales where the chlorine tanks will actually sit. Currently we hold about 12 tanks of chlorine, and with this new facility we'll be able to hold 20 tanks of chlorine, just helping minimize downtime between chlorine fill up. But what you can see here is in this facility we've got a 3-ton overhead crane. This crane will be able to lift each of these tanks off of the trucks and onto the scales that I was showing here, which will make that process a lot smoother. And then part of this facility, we're adding chlorine metering equipment. Basically, this just meters the chlorine that's coming out of the plant and what we're injecting into the water. It just will make that a much more efficient system and way of tracking all the chlorine that we're putting in the system. This is a chlorine scrubber. Basically, what happens if one of those tanks that we're offloading should have a leak or burst or something of that effect, this building is capable of completely shutting down. And the chlorine gas is very toxic. It could kill people in an instant. So what we're doing, this is just another way to add another factor of safety to our facility. Basically what will happen is somebody can hit a button and it'll close that whole building down, and then this scrubber will suck all of the air out of that building and remove the chlorine from the air within that building, and then from going into the atmosphere as well.
So that, when you say sucking the oxygen out of the room, that's actually what sucks the oxygen out of the room.
Well, it sucks the air. Sorry.
Well, I know I was.
Yeah. The chlorine
Maybe
scrubber.
we may need to get one of those for
I mean,
for this room sometime.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was irreverent of me.
The seemingly
Not you,
appropriate.
Currently, our liquid ammonium sulfate is stored within the facility, and we don't have near the capacity of what these new liquid ammonium sulfate tanks will have. So it's just another perk of adding on to the facility. The well field, currently we're still drilling 6 more wells, And, we're having to do all the well field collector pipes within the well field as well, digging those out. And, this just kind of gives you some pictures of what's going on out there with the way it looks. They're having to dig through a ton of rock out there, and it's been very, very interesting, to say the least. The booster pump station, this is out in the well field, or very close to the well field. These are the pumps that actually pump the water back to San Angelo. They actually pump it to, if you're just outside of Eden there's a above ground storage tank that we've added. These pumps are pumping to that location. Part of the phase 2, or included with this drilling the new wells, we'll be adding another booster pump to have more capacity there to accommodate for the additional wells, so that we can pump more water back to San Angelo. The existing wells are kind of on the east side of the site here. This is just an overall picture of the well field. The new wells that are currently being drilled are on the west side, and they've completed 2 wells and are in the process of drilling 2 more, and we'll eventually have 6 new wells, but it's taking a lot longer than what they had originally anticipated. But thank God we've gotten some rain to where it hasn't been as big of an issue.
Well, that doesn't actually increase the capacity of what we can actually get and use. It just, what does that just?
No, this will increase the capacity of what we can use. Currently, we're with the wells that we have right now, we can use 6 million gallons per day. These additional wells will bring us to a capacity of, we can actually pump 9 million gallons per day, but we can only treat 8 million gallons per day. This is just a picture of the well testing. Each well that they drill, they have to do kind of a purging, more or less, and do some tests, to see how much water it'll actually produce. This is producing at about 950 gallons per minute from an 8-inch line. This is just the normal process of developing a well. Some of the other projects that we have going on, or that we're looking at, we have a wastewater reuse study going on right now. This is another potential water source for the city of San Angelo. The city council approved this back in May. It should be, the reuse study should be completed in late spring. We'll actually be getting an update on this tomorrow. So that'll be very interesting to hear. Currently, we're treating our effluent water and releasing it out to local farmers out in the Wall area. And then what this study will do is we'll be exploring different options of how we can use this water, either within the city, or or releasing it downstream. Just there's a bunch of different ways of looking at this. A lot of cities are going to this trend of reusing water. Currently, Abilene, Big Springs, and Wichita Falls are using a reuse water as drinking water. And for San Angelo, it could yield approximately 7 million gallons per day for San Angelo. So it would be a very valuable source of water. The Red Arroyo recapture project, this was also approved back in May. Basically, we're in the preliminary stages of looking at how we could capture water coming off the Red Arroyo, where we could put it, how much it would be used, and if it's an actual viable source. We've got to look at exhaust all options of water sources. Basically, this water would be diverted into, potentially a small pond, but the pond would have to be built at this point. There is not an existing pond, and to make it viable, you have to have enough volume, and it's just there's just some disagreement on the viability of the actual project. But so we're working on a study to check on the viability of that. Currently, this is the this is actually from the 1st of December. The flow going between the equalization channel between the Twin Buttes, North Pool and South Pool. We've been out there this last week, and it's actually more than doubled this amount going between the channels, and all we can figure is just the mesquite trees going dormant, is the reason we're getting more water from the South Pool to the North Pool, but it's definitely looks more promising.
Back in the ASU days, Phil Neighbors actually used to do a swan dive off that little cliff there.
I believe it, yeah. But
He landed on his head one too many times.
well, that really concludes my presentation. Do y'all have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
Is the water coming from the Brady well fields functional? Is it operational? Is any of it being introduced into our water distribution system?
Yes, with the line from, and I'm sorry I didn't hit on that. The line from Melvin to San Angelo is completed. We're currently capable of bringing in the full 6 million gallons per day right now. But we, based on the TCQ rules and the regulations there, we would have to dilute it with our existing water. So what we've been doing off and on just to see, how it would react with, mixing with Ivy water and the Concho water, is we've been diluting it at about 1 million gallons per, 10 million to 12 million gallons per day. So 1 million of that was hickory, and the 9 to 11 million was Ivy or Concho water. And so we've kind of gotten off of that, but once we've started the testing phases of the ion exchange to WRT tanks, once those basically get wet, we have to continue to use those. So we should be completing the actual testing and everything the end of this month. So we'll be using that water on a more continual basis, but it will be on a pretty minimal use. We want to use that hickory water as a last resort type deal. So
Russell, back to the treated effluent. Is that satisfactory? And you said Abilene,
yeah.
Midland, Wichita Falls. Is that introduced as potable water into the system?
Correct. Yeah. So like Abilene, what they're doing, or based on my limited knowledge of what they're doing, basically they're taking, or what they're going to do, they're still in the design build phase of their project. Abilene is. They'll basically have 2 treatment units or 2 treatment trains. One will be a reverse osmosis, and one will be a membrane type filtration. They'll take it, it'll be treated in their wastewater treatment plant, and then taken through those 2 trains. Then once it's treated, it's still it's technically drinking water after those 2 trains. And then what they do is they're going to actually pump it back into, is it Lake Fort Phantom or something right there in town? Mm-hmm. They'll pump it into there, and then that's where they'll draw it out of the lake back through their treatment plant, and then back out into distribution. Wichita Falls, they're basically treating it to a drinkable standard. Instead of dumping it into a natural water body, they're actually putting it back into their raw water pipe where they're pulling water from, and then they run it through their water treatment plant and out into their distribution system.
Well, that would be a huge deal, and like you said, if we could do that. Wow.
Yes, if we could go basically pipe to pipe, that would be the most efficient. It has probably the least amount of approval as far as public perception, though. And TCEQ, it is relatively new. TCEQ has tighter regulations on that because it is so new. They don't have a standard way of doing that. So what we would have to do is we would have to work very closely with some experts and TCEQ to get something like that approved. But it would definitely be the most efficient way of using our water. But, you know, we'd have to build some infrastructure to be able to do that. I mean, we'd have to do infrastructure no matter what we would do, but, you know, since we do have 3 lakes here in town, more or less, you know, there are some options as far as where we could dump it into or how we could reuse that effluent water, so.
Okay, on your first treatment plant, that's where you separate the ions for the water. Is that true?
That's where we separate the radium and the iron from the water,
Okay.
correct?
What do we do with the radioactive waste?
WRT, the company that provides the vessels or the ion exchange vessels,
Right.
we have a contract with them. You know, it's a long-term contract for them to come in. They actually do the testing on the media to make sure that it's removing the radium at the rates that it should be. You know, it should be removing at 100% more or less. So, and then they actually come in too and will remove the media and properly dispose of the media.
Okay. In other words, what they're going to do is take it back to Melvin and put it in the ground. Tongue in cheek there.
Oh, right. No, I don't know. That's their problem.
Okay.
Thanks,
Anything else?
Russell.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
We will now move on to item number 6, consideration and possible action of approving the professional services agreement between the City of San Angelo Development Corporation and the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce. And we welcome Roland Pena.
Good morning, Board.
Could I ask one question before we do that?
Sure.
We've gotten a report and update on the parks projects and on the water projects. And I know we get a report on the airport terminal project every once in a while. And a lot of the money that's being spent on these is from the half-cent sales tax. And obviously there's other money too. And accounting is done to us to tell us how much money has come in, how much is allocated for it, how much has been spent. But what is our responsibility? What is the responsibility of the development corporation to see that these ballot projects are completed? Or do we have no responsibility and we simply account for the money? In other words, who is in charge of getting it done?
Let me give that a stab, and I'll rely on. Pardon?
True. However, if you can't answer the question, we could interpret it as being within the item. Just briefly, in relation to the reason why you're giving an update, is that?
Yes,
how-
yes, and really that I spoke to John before the meeting got started. The providing the reason why these 2 presentations were before you today is because they are half-cent sales tax ballot items, and it's good to keep you abreast of those projects. The gentlemen that made the presentations are the project managers, and so I felt it was good to bring them before you on a frequent basis so they can, so that you can have your questions answering and let them answer any questions that you may have. But in essence, we stay abreast of those projects, and they come to us periodically to provide that information. Finance provides the financial and accounting for us monthly, but if you have specific questions about those projects, we felt that it'd be good for them to come before you.
Richard, let me take a stab at it too.
Okay.
We're on these projects. We are the bank.
Okay.
There are experts that oversee the projects.
Okay, great.
Uh-oh.
And here comes one of the
Uh-oh.
experts. Here comes one of the experts.
I was satisfied with that explanation.
I think it's a good question, and I think it's reasonable for this board to have an expectation that those projects are accomplished in a reasonable time frame. So if we ever get into a project that you think has been delayed too long, or is, oh my gosh, it's moving down the road, and talk to us about what your feelings are about timing. That ballot is specifically one of the core documents associated with managing this function. And so if you ever have any questions, or if, individually or as a board, about how that is moving or not moving, we should engage in a discussion and talk about that.
Okay.
So I think you do want to take that extra step to inquire. If there's something that's in the ballot and it's not done or it doesn't appear to be moving, let's talk about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now return to our regularly scheduled item. Thank you, Richard.
All right, board members, what I have for you in this item is the professional services agreement with the Chamber of Commerce. This is a contract that we've had since September of 2008. We have been working very closely together, Phil Neighbors, myself, and Michael Looney over the past few months, and we've reviewed the terms of the agreement. We have spent a lot of time on the scope of service. You'll note there's some clarification. We wanted to be specific about targeting industries, in specifically the NAICS codes. We also talked about compensation reimbursement and performance measures. This is a contract that is usually executed prior to the fiscal year, which begins October 1. It has a $225,000 annual impact, paid in monthly installments, and you'll note that I've said of up to $18,750, and that is because of the manner of compensation. So we've talked. In our discussions, we've talked, and basically at the direction of the board, you've been providing the direction as early as last month as we were talking about all the contracts and how we make payment for those contracts. So we've talked about being able to reimburse for work performed. And so in this case, we did talk about NAICS targeting those NAICS codes specifically. We talked about aligning those targeting and recruitment efforts with our strategic plan and our prioritized goals. You're going to have a plan of action and a marketing plan that will come before you in January. That is specific to the contract. In terms of reimbursement, when we review that invoice and part of their performance measures is that they report on progress. We had a lot of discussion about unit cost. So in that, we're talking about a work summary, a work performed, what does that cost? What are those materials cost? So we want to see a more detailed invoice as opposed to a dollar amount. So that's why I've stated up to a certain amount per month. And so we're expecting to see some changes there. It does include sharing of information, communication, and participation with the work that we do on a daily basis. Michael Looney has moved into the BRC, and he's spending more time there. We're seeing a lot of that happening already as time goes on.
Roland, hang on, just where is that spelled out in the? I did not see that anywhere in the contract.
That is correct, and it might have been. It might have been an oversight on my part, Tommy. I went back to look about that. I think we intended to specify that we wanted to spend a certain amount of time, and Michael and I have talked about perhaps 3 days a week, but it's not included in the contract. That doesn't. I don't think we have an issue with that. I don't think Michael has an issue with that. So I mean, at your discretion, we can make that change, add that change to the contract.
Personal opinion, I think it needs to be in the contract. We've just it just clarifies in my mind. If it's 3 days a week, it's 3 days a week. And then because I noticed if I'm not mistaken, there was something in there about if it doesn't meet, if it's not 100%, then we're only going to reimburse up to the percentage of time spent. I guess Michael's time spent, we're not going to reimburse 100% if we don't get 100% of the effort. So it seems to me that we ought to have have it clearly spelled out somewhere in the contract or in an addendum or something that, you know, if it's 3 days a week, it's 3 days a week. And that, to me, in my one board member's opinion, that could be 5 days one week, and it might be 2 days the next week, and, you know, day and a half the next. But it needs, maybe there needs to be a number of hours or something. It needs to be flexible, but there needs to be an expectation in my mind of all of our, you know, we've talked about one-stop shop for these many years, and we still don't have a one-stop shop, in my opinion, with all the partners. So I think it needs to be in there.
Okay. I know it's mentioned, and I'm trying to look for it. I know it's mentioned that we want them to spend, I think the prior language was, want them to spend as much time as possible or as needed. So that was the change that we would make. You don't have an issue with that, Michael? Phil?
Well, I'll be in there. It's not a problem at all.
Okay. We can make that addition to the contract.
Okay?
Any other questions?
Yeah, Roland, this contract, does it follow the recommendations of the recent audit?
Yes, and I provided that information to you Thanksgiving week,
That's right.
and that is the reason for some of the changes that you see here. So these performance measures, we'll use these performance measures to validate the invoice. So if the invoice, the invoice will have to state status on the performance measure, and what percentage of that is complete, how much time has been spent on that, and so it aligns with that contract review.
I have a couple more questions if nobody else does. We have talked about a business-to-business initiative to encourage everyone to try to do business with a local business in San Angelo before they go outside for whatever the service, whatever the commodity may be. And I didn't see anything mentioned, I may have missed it, but didn't see anything mentioned about, from a marketing standpoint, about the chamber leading the charge on that initiative. And let me be clear too, I'm not talking about a retail. That doesn't have anything to do with retail. This is the business community that if I got some business I can do with Daniel, before I go and look on the internet or pick up a telephone, call an 800 number, I need to call Daniel first. Can we assure that happens? Absolutely not. But I think we need to start raising the awareness for our citizens and our businesses to do business with local businesses first. To me, there's a huge opportunity from an economic development standpoint for us to do that. So I didn't see that mentioned, and I don't know if y'all discussed that or not. But to me, it needs to be if it needs to be noted somewhere that if that's going to be a part of it, we need to have that duly noted.
Director, we did talk about it, and it was part of our discussions. In fact, it should be relatively easy for us to bring back to you this marketing plan and action plan, because a lot of it has been discussed already. That's gonna be a fine line because of the NAICS code, BREP, and so forth. But we're gonna work on it, and that is part of one of our initiatives in the marketing plan. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, remember we talked about we didn't contact and go local.
Okay, good. And
So we are reviewing some ideas and some alternatives, and we'll discuss that more and firm that up, and we should have a plan for you in the next board meeting.
Okay, and then I noticed, let me find it here. I'm looking at page 14 of the, I guess it's page 14 of the contract, or at least it shows here on the bottom of the page 14. Professional memberships, Texas 1,000, and so forth. And then there is a line through West Texas Energy Consortium, $200, Texas Midwest Community Network, $5,000, 2015 already paid. What does that, I don't know what that means. Does that mean that's not ours, that is ours, the chamber's going to use their money? I don't know what that means for those professional memberships.
in our discussions, Michael and I discussed that those are two items that are not going to be part of the contract. I believe the chamber has already paid TMCN out of their funds.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Are there any other questions? Any public comment? Okay. What action are we looking for here? Simply a straight up approval? Do I have a motion?
It's approval with the amendment of days per week.
Yes.
I would move approval of the contract with that amendment to the number of days per week, number of hours, or whatever is the most flexible and most reasonable for both parties. I'll let y'all work out those details.
And I'll second.
Okay. Now is there, yes, Phil?
Discussion. Of course, we're very pleased with the contract, looking forward to the marketing plan. As far as the language on the days or hours in the BRC, I think our heart is to be there as much as we need to be. One of the cautions that I would just put out there is that a lot of Michael's time is spent out in the field, either in the community or outside or doing other things. And so I would hate for us to go into an interpretation that meant hours in a chair in that office, because he might be centering out of the BRC that day or at the chamber and be out of the office the majority of the day. So, I just want us to understand that a lot of the time is out there calling on businesses, attending meetings, and a lot of the meetings are at the BRC. So there's a lot of ways to interpret that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we'll be very sensitive to this board and Roland's and Bob's thoughts about, are we there enough? Are we providing enough service? Or are we, gone too much just because of the nature of economic development?
Yes.
So I don't know what that language should be, but that's just my comment before you approve the contract.
I think everybody understands. I think it's also a performance. In my mind, it's a performance issue that, we have a contract and there are certain measures within the contract, and, so as long as everybody's clear. I'm clear on what Phil said, but I think we have some expectations too.
I totally understand where Phil's coming from, and I think we at least Michael has been great. I mean, he's been there at the office. I understand that Michael has some demands, and obviously when he's on recruitment trips and trade shows, he's not going to be there those 3 days a week. He's not going to be able to do that. So I think we have the understanding of the nature of the type of business, and so I fully agree with what Phil is saying and what you're saying. We can
Are
work
we
that in.
satisfied with the motion?
Some people are for it and some people are against it, so I stand with my friends.
That's right.
Just as a suggestion, perhaps we could say something like 60% of his in-office time would be spent in the BRC.
Y'all can work out the details.
Yeah, we'll work it out.
Y'all can work out the
Yeah.
details.
Yeah. Are we satisfied with your motion standing as you said it?
I'm good.
Okay. Daniel?
I'm
So-
good as well. I wouldn't pay an employee to sit in the office all day. I would expect them to be out making a sale.
That's right.
And Michael does that. Okay. With that, is there any other public comment? Then I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
I need to ask to be excused. I have to be about 60 miles from here in 45 minutes, so it's going to be exciting.
Be safe in your travels.
Okay.
We do not provide excuses for the DPS.
What would you like? Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
See you, Richard.
Okay, we still have a quorum, so we shall continue. Item number 7 on the agenda. Consideration of approving the real estate sales contract between the City of San Angelo Development Corporation, COSA DC, and Gary and Marcia Schubert for the purchase of 2 tracts of approximately 5.25 acres each out of the remainder of Lot 1, Block 3, San Angelo Gateway Edition, Section 1, as recorded in Plat Cabinet F, Slide 17, Records of Tom Green County, Texas, and being immediately north of and adjacent to that 20-acre tract per warranty deed recorded in instrument number 20137485532, official records of Tom Green County, Texas, at a price of $25,000 per acre in exchange, the exact acreage to be determined by a survey on the ground and authorizing the Costa DC Board President to execute a sales contract in substantially the same form as the attached. And I apologize, my allergies have my eyes gummy. I'm not seeing clearly at the moment. And this is again presented by Roland Pena.
Board members, on August 22nd at that regular board meeting, you approved and authorized staff to negotiate a real estate contract for approximately 10 acres. And this is real estate land at the industrial park. The buyer does wish to close by the end of the year. City Council did approve the contract on December 2nd. Interesting, because they wanted to close by the end of the year, we reversed through some creativity. I mean, we talked to legal, and we felt that since City Council approves the Costa DC contracts, we could take it to them in advance, have them approve it, and then bring it to the board and still meet the requirements of what is needed to close on the property. These are 2 tracts. These are going to be north of Case Hole Solutions at a price of $25,000 per acre. Like you read, Mr. President, its exact acreage will be determined by survey. Approximate purchase price will be $262,500. The developer, just some additional information on the developer. He's out of Hobbs, New Mexico. He's built other Case Hole Solutions facilities, one in Hobbs. He builds about 15 facilities per year. I think he's on course to build 19 facilities this year. He does have properties in Lubbock and Midland, Odessa, and Snyder, and Roswell, but he's anxious to get into the San Angelo market. It's based on his studies. Typically, he builds facilities in the range of 5,000 to 8,000 square feet, and normally his tenants employ 20 or more people. With that, I would recommend approval, and am open for any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? With that, do we have a motion?
I'd move we approve this real estate sales contract as presented in the agenda and read into the record.
Second.
1 second. With that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It carries. And thank you for expediting that. Next, we have executive session. We do have an executive session scheduled for today. Executive session under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551. Open meetings, Subchapter D, exceptions to requirements that meetings be open. Section 551.0712, to consult with its attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter. Section 551.072, to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. Section 551.087, to discuss an offer of financial or other incentive to a company or companies with whom the City of San Angelo Development Corporation is conducting economic development negotiations, in which the City of San Angelo Development Corporation seeks to have, locate, stay, or expand in San Angelo. With that, we move into executive session. Thank you. Oh, the time. Okay, the time is now 10:03, and we are coming back out of executive session with nothing to report from that session. So we return to open session. Let's see, we have follow-up and administrative items. Item 8, staff update on the following: AEP Quality Site Program and Connected Texas. Pardon me.
Okay, board members, I'll keep this relatively short. First item we have is on the, or that I have is on the Industrial Park AEP Quality Site Certification Phase 3. As the board's aware, we've been through the first 2 phases successfully, and we're moving now through Phase 3, which would be the final phase and obtaining site certification. There are a number of plans and studies that are required as a result or as a function of Phase 3. And those include, among other things, a boundary survey, an attorney's title opinion on the title reports, topographic survey, some of which we already have done, engineer's cost estimate of any plans that we're going to go forward with, floodplain certification, Phase 1 environmental report, Phase 2 environmental site assessment if it's required, and we don't know that at this stage whether one would be or not, but we don't suspect that there is. A wetlands delineation, endangered and threatened species report, archaeological report, geotechnical report, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which we already have in place for Phase 1, but not, Phase 1. The first unit of the industrial park. Thank you. And then also a master development plan. There's a lot of plans here, a lot of reports to be done. We have a relatively short amount of time to accomplish this. And so staff came up with the idea of putting out a request for information from some of the local professional firms to see if it was viable to get one firm that has the capability or can put together a team to address all of these issues. The advantage of this is at the end of the day, we can offer to a potential developer, to a potential site selector, let's say 100 acres, contiguous property with everything in place, all the reports are done. They literally, it's not to use an incorrect phrase, but shovel ready, or at least a plan to get it to that stage within 6 to 9 months. So the final deadline to have all work completed on Phase 3 and have approvals in place is August 2015. Staff is looking at trying to have everything done by this coming spring, April, perhaps May timeframe, to give us time to get it submitted, have them review it, and address any shortcomings that may still exist. Staff sent out a request for RFIs to 3 local firms to identify their interest and their ability to provide all the required services in a timely manner. All 3 firms have responded with proposed team makeup, their prior experience on similar projects, and resumes of key personnel, and we've got some good responses. Staff will be conducting phone interviews with all 3 firms this Friday to answer any outstanding questions that we have, and we would anticipate coming back to the board in January with a recommendation by staff to select one of those firms, if in fact that's all the questions are answered. Any questions on AEP site certification? The second item that I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about is the Connected Texas Broadband Certification, another certification process that we're pursuing that basically puts us on a list of a very few communities in the state of Texas that are served at a very high rate with broadband internet access. It's a certification. It's something that indicates that we are technologically an advanced community. We're not, we're not falling behind the power curve. We thought when we first went into this process, we thought that we were about 97% served in Tom Green County, with mainly the sort of western part of the panhandle, if you will, being underserved. We had a community meeting of community leaders on December 4th, and we also had all the internet providers there, and we find that we're actually served more to maybe the tune of about 99%. And there's also a lot of higher speed service either available or on the immediate horizon. So that was a very it was a very informal, informational meeting, or informing meeting for us. They handed out a number of questionnaires. They'd sent some of them out in advance. All the questionnaires were filled out and returned, except for 3 of the outlying school districts. I think Christoval, Very Best, and Grape Creek were the 3 that hadn't, and Community Hospital hadn't turned theirs in yet. So between Michael Looney and I, we're going to be chasing those down over the next few days and try to get that in. And then we will have another meeting with the Connected Texas folks. They were very, very optimistic, very upbeat about the turnout that we got. We had about 20 people from around the community, 20 of the business leaders and the providers. That's looking very promising, and I think it's another sort of feather in our cap, if you will, that we have going on. Of course, the business retention expansion program is also still going on. I wasn't going to address that specifically now. We're looking at a launch right after the first of the year on a lot of things, but we've got some things in progress. Any questions on that?
No, thank you very much.
Thanks.
As we move on to announcements.
Yes, announcements.
Dave Erickson has an announcement he'd like to make from the Small Business Development Center.
Hello, David.
Hello. Good morning.
It is a good morning.
Good morning, board. Just quickly want to announce the part of the BREP program. We have our next upcoming Fast Track Growth Venture 10-week entrepreneurial course starting February 19th through April 23rd, and we're recruiting right now for that class. As you know, last spring we had a very successful class of local businesses that really got a lot out of it, and their testimonials are on the WTIN website, who's a facilitator of Fast Track Growth Venture. And so just to announce that, and there's scholarships available through the West Texas Energy Consortium, in addition to the funds that Costa DC will support some also who are eligible. So, and also just to say, we had a Profit Mastery class this month. We had 6 attendees. I think 3 were supported by Costa DC funds, and that's a 2-day class for financial acumen, very successful. And finally, just want to announce that January 15th, 25 years ago, the SBDC was formed. So we're going to celebrate our 25th anniversary on January 15th. And Harlan Bruja was the first director, as many of you know. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, we wanted to recognize that milestone. So.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other announcements? Okay. Future agenda items and board requests of staff. I think everybody wants to close out the year. Yes, Roland?
I just want to check in with you. We talked about at some point having a mid-year board workshop. Just kind of check in, see how things are going, review our goals, and perhaps take more direction about what the board's thinking about in terms of what they want us to pursue. If you're comfortable with adding that to the January agenda, we can pursue that, a board workshop either before or after the board meeting to discuss that.
I think that's a good suggestion. Okay. And is there anything else?
Well, I'll move we adjourn for 2014.
Okay. Before we take that vote, I think on behalf of the board and the staff, we'd like to wish everyone in this community a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish prosperity on the entire community, and that is our prayer. And I'll entertain that motion.
I'll move we adjourn for 2014.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. See you next year.